You know, at Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. And what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's get into today's story. Training Ground 4 smelled of hot mud and burnt wiring. Simulated artillery shells screamed overhead, each concussive blast vibrating through Dale Arness's bones. He scrambled over a ferrocrete barrier, his borrowed pulse rifle feeling clumsy and unfamiliar in his hands. All around him, alien languages filtered through their universal translators into a staccato of panicked shouts echoed across the field.
Sci team, advance to checkpoint 3!
Sergeant Ross boomed, his voice a gravelly avalanche over the comms, resonating from his massive armored torso.
Move, you backworld degenerates! Move like I have a purpose!
Dell moved. He was trying his best, but the Stellar Compact designed his standard-issue combat armor for a more standard anatomy. It pinched at his shoulders and rode up in his crotch, a constant nagging reminder that humans were a galactic afterthought. He was trying to keep pace with Cog, the squad synthetic scout, but the compact machine skimmed over the terrain on a cushion of air, a streak of polished chrome and flickering auto-bounce glyphs. Ahead, a web of stun-laced cargo netting lay strewn across their path, a so-called entanglement obstacle. Cog zipped through a gap with infuriating ease. Dell, trying to follow, called a boot. He stumbled, flailed for balance, and pitched forward like a falling boulder. He landed half inside the net, his momentum carrying him into a clumsy roll. Sound cut through the din of battle, a low predatory hum, a pulsating wall of crimson light, a plasma containment field meant to simulate enemy energy barriers pulsed just ahead, the final obstacle before the checkpoint.
Arness, what in the nine hells are you doing?
Dell, tangled in the electrified mesh, tried to push himself back.
Just a little tied up, Sarge.
He grunted, his voice a cheerful drawl from his homeworld ridge home. The netting sparked against his armor, sending a harmless but jarring jolt through his body. He twisted, attempting to untangle his legs, which only worsened the predicament. He was like a calf caught in its first fins. With a final, desperate heave, the netting gave way, acting like a slingshot and launching him forward. Telacor gasped, her eyes wide and dark. Cog's vocalizer emitted a series of rapid analytical clicks that his translator rendered as a simple clipped, "Oh, slag." Then he hit the plasma field. Heat, instantaneous and overwhelming, washed over him. His helmet display lit up with a flood of crimson damage icons and a blaring proximity alert. The outer ablative layers smoked and blackened, polymers vaporizing with a sharp, acrid smell. The world became a roaring inferno of red light and static. A deep percussive thump resonated through him as the field's energy tried to cook him alive inside his own suit. He braced for the pain. Instead, he rolled through. He tumbled out of the other side, landing in a heap in the mud, smoke wafting from his charred armor. The exercise klaxon blared, signaling a critical failure. The simulated artillery fell silent. The plasma field dissipated. Dell pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. He slapped at a few glowing embers on his chest plate. He ran his hands over his suit, finding it intact. A profound warmth radiated from his chest, like standing too close to a bonfire on a cold night. He looked down at his scorched plating, then back at his stunned squad mates.
"I reckon that'll leave a mark,"
he said, his words echoing in the silence. Sergeant Ross was on him in moments. The Kraken, a monolith of layered exoskeleton, moved with ground-shaking impacts. The overlapping plates on his shoulders shifted and settled.
"Arness, report! What is your status, you insubordinate clod?"
"I'm all right, Sarge," Dell said, still brushing at his chest. "Suit's a little smoky is all." Tella, the team's cerulean medic, rushed to his side, her diagnostic scanner humming. She hovered her slender fingers over his chest plate, and her empathetic senses picked up a confusingly mild signal of surprise. It felt like a dull, thrumming shock, like a bell struck with a felt mallet instead of a hammer. She looked from her scanner's placid readouts to Dell's unfazed expression, her composure faltering for a moment. Ross jabbed a thick armored finger into Dell's chest, right over the blackened spot.
"You breached protocol! You compromised the exercise! You demonstrated a level of tactical ineptitude I have rarely witnessed! Live plasma undampened would have cooked you inside that suit! Understand?"
Dell considered this with an earnest frown. Make the mark a bit bigger, I'd guess. Ross' heavy jaw plate shifted for a moment. He looked at Dell, then at the frizzled cargo net, then back at Dell. He hoped his mouth to unleash another tirade, but closed it, rendered silent. The 81st Training Platoon's barracks held the scent of chemical cleanser and the clashing biologies of a dozen different species in a confined space. The sterile metallic box unsettled Dell, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of rich soil, of rain on broadleaf trees, the sweet musky odor of his family's megagrox herd. He had tacked a single faded photograph to the wall above his bunk, a picture of him grinning, leaning against the furry, mountainous flank of Daisy, his favorite in the herd. "It sounds," Cog chirped from his bunk, his translator spitting out the words with clipped finality, "like a dying atmospheric engine, a massive atmospheric engine, sputtering and wet as it dies." Dell, sound asleep moments before, sat up. "Huh? What's that, Cog?" "Your nocturnal respiratory cycle," Cog clarified, a small indicator light on his chassis blinking red. "You're snoring. I have cross-referenced the sound with my database. The closest match is a freighter's inertial dampener failing during atmospheric entry." "Oh, sorry about that," Dell said, rubbing his eyes. "Back home they say a man's snore signifies a clear conscience." "According to my database, it is a sign of a deviated septum and grounds for justifiable terminating the sound source," Cog retorted. "Tell, your species has those external ears. How do you tolerate the noise?" Telecor looked up from her data screen, on which she was studying cerulean field medicine. She smiled faintly. "I find it rhythmic. It helps me meditate." Cog's chassis emitted a quiet, erratic series of clicks. "You are a strange and baffling organism." Dell decided a peace offering was in order. He sat up and swung his legs to the floor, then rummaged in his footlocker. He produced a vacuum-sealed packet and tore it open, releasing a rich, smoky, peppery aroma into the sterile air. "Well, maybe this will make up for it," he said, holding up a dark, leathery strip of meat. "Beef jerky. My pa makes the best on Richo. It's Megagrox prime cut." He offered a piece to Cog. The synthetic leaned forward, his optical sensors focusing on the object. He sampled the air with delicate twitching antennae. His vocalizer emitted a low hum of distaste. "You want me to ingest a desecrated strip of preserved muscle tissue from a deceased mammalian creature?" Cog asked. "It's good. Got a nice peppery kick," Dell insisted. "Rust, you want a piece?" Sergeant Rost, who was meticulously cleaning his pulse rifle at the barracks' far end, looked up. "Negative, Harness. I avoid unregulated nutrient matter. My species' biology requires a diet of high-fiber, lithic growths. Your jerky would be biochemically indigestible." Dell sighed. He looked at Tella, who offered him a gentle, apologetic smile. "Thank you, Dell, but my metabolism requires simpler nutrients," she said. "I appreciate the gesture, however." Dell shrugged and bit off a piece for himself, chewing thoughtfully. The familiar, smoky taste was a small comfort, a connection to life that felt 1,000 light years away. He missed the air's weight, the feel of real dirt under his boots, the simple logic of farming. Out here, everything was alien. The food was unfamiliar, the beds were disquieting, and his squad mates, as much as he liked them, were the most foreign of all. Cog watched him chew, the hum from his chassis softening to a neutral frequency as he tilted his optical sensor housing. "Your species is bizarre. You walk through plasma, you generate seismic-level snores, and you derive pleasure from gnawing on cured animal flesh. What other biological peculiarities are you hiding?" Dell just grinned. "Oh, we're just getting warmed up." The recruits affectionately called the final boot camp evaluation the backbreaker. The objective was simple. The instructors declared a 50-ton armored transport vehicle disabled in the middle of a knee-deep mud pit. The objective, move it 3 meters using only standard-issue gear and brute force. The task was less a measure of strength and more a trial of teamwork and desperation. Rain lashed down, turning the training ground into a soupy quagmire. They struggled for 2 hours, and the transport remained mired in place. Rost, his dense exoskeleton slick with rain, bellowed orders, his voice raw.
Put your backs into it! It's a matter of applied physics, you pathetic excuses for soldiers! Cog, secure the winch to the forward axle! Tella, on my mark, push! Arnis, stop standing there like a scarecrow and push!
They tried. Cog, hovering on his air cushion, was too light to get any purchase. His directional jets just sprayed mud. Tella pushed with all her might, her slender frame straining, providing too little mass for the task. Rost's immense strength was best for kinetic burst, ill-suited for the sustained grinding force required. The transport did not budge from the mud. Dell stood back for a moment, wiping mud from his face. He was thinking about Old Man Hemlock's prize-winning megagrox, Tiberius, who habitually stuck himself in the South Pasture swamp every spring. Only cleverness worked on Tiberius. He had to outsmart him to change the problem. "Sarge," Dell said, cutting through Ross' stream of insults, "this approach is failing."
Your first correct assessment today, Arnis.
Ross snarled.
Do you have a brilliant alternative, or are you here just to provide commentary?
"Maybe," Dell said as he scanned the training ground's periphery. He spotted a discarded support strut, a thick bar of plasteel about 3 meters long lying near a pile of construction debris. "Back home, when a boulder's sitting where you want to plant corn, you persuade it to move." He slogged through the mud and hefted the plasteel bar. It was heavy, easily 200 kilograms, but the crushing gravity of Ridgehome had layered his bones with calcium and woven his muscles into dense, powerful cords. He carried it back to the transport, his boots sinking deep into the muck with every step. "Honest, what is that for?" Tella said, her breath misting in the cold air. "It's a persuader," Dell replied. He waded to the transport's rear and slid one end of the bar deep into the mud beneath the vehicle's main axle. "Cog, give me a hand. I need something hard and flat." Cog returned a moment later with a flat sheet of ferrocrete. Dell positioned it in the mud, close to the transport, and settled the plasteel bar over it. The short end of the bar was now wedged under the axle. "All right," Dell grunted, planting his feet wide and wrapping his hands around the long end of the bar. "This here," he said, nodding toward the ferrocrete, "is the fulcrum. The bar's the lever." He took a deep breath. "And I'm the persuasion." He heaved, putting every ounce of his high-gravity strength into pushing the bar's long end down. His muscles strained, burning with the effort. The veins in his neck stood out thick and taut. The mud around his boots churned as he fought for purchase. The transport held fast for a moment. Then, with a great sucking groan of tortured metal and displaced mud, the 50-ton vehicle shifted. It moved only a few centimeters, lifting its back end from the rut's deepest part. But it was enough.
"Now!"
Dell roared.
"Push now!"
The squad threw themselves against the vehicle. With the transport's immense weight momentarily shifted, their combined effort found purchase. The massive machine lurched forward, its treads finding slightly firmer ground. They pushed again, and it moved another half-meter. They repeated the process twice more. Dell, using his body as the anchor point, the pivot, the fulcrum of their effort, levered the transport up while the others pushed it forward until they were all gasping for air, covered head to toe in mud, with the vehicle sitting a full 3 meters from its starting position. Ross walked over to Dell, who was leaning against the transport, breathing heavily. The sergeant stared at the plasteel bar, then at the deep impressions Dell's boots had left in the mud. He looked at the human. "Report to the med bay, Arnis," he rumbled. "Have Tella check you for a hernia." He paused and added, "From now on, your call sign is Fulcrum." He looked at the team. "Now get this team cleaned up. You look like a pack of mudwumpers." As Ross walked away, Cog zipped up to Dell, his chassis lights flashing a rapid chaotic pattern of white and blue. "I have analyzed the torque and mass to force ratios. The strain on your skeletal structure should have resulted in multiple fractures. Your physiology is anomalous." Dell just wiped a smear of mud from his cheek and grinned. "Yeah, farm boys learn a trick or two, little buddy." The med bay was sterile white and calm, a stark contrast to the training ground's mud and chaos. The air hummed with advanced medical technology. Telecor moved with an unhurried purpose, treating the new recruits. Dell sat on the edge of a diagnostic bed stripped to the waist. The plasma burns from the earlier exercise were patches of raw red skin that looked more like a severe sunburn than the result of engulfment in superheated gas. "Remarkable," Tella murmured, passing a scanner over his chest. Its soft blue light flickered as it tried to make sense of the readings. The cellular damage is minimal, superficial thermal agitation, nothing more. The suit must have absorbed most of the energy. Felt warm, Dell offered. It should have felt like your internal organs boiling, she corrected. She adjusted the settings on the scanner, pushing it to a deeper, more granular analysis. On her main console, a holographic display of Dell's cellular structure resolved into view. Tella leaned closer, widening her eyes. What she was seeing defied the textbooks of standard humanoid biology. His cells were incredibly dense. A complex network of protein chains reinforced them, a microscopic web of biological reinforcement that permeated every tissue. The cell walls themselves were unusually thick, and the mitochondrial count was exceptionally high. Every cell in his body possessed its own internal suit of armor. "Dell," she said, her voice soft. "Tell me about your home, Ridge Home." Dell's expression softened at the mention of his world. "It's quiet, green, lots of hills, big trees. The air's thick and the sky's, I don't know, bigger somehow." He paused. "It's a heavy place. You feel it in your bones from birth. Makes you strong, my pa always said." "Heavy," Tella prompted. "You mean the gravity?" "Reckon so. Never thought much about it. It's just home." Tella cross-referenced the data from his file. Homeworld Ridge Home, gravity 2.5 standard Gs. The cause was adaptation. Generations of living under a constant crushing weight had forced human biology to reinforce itself on a fundamental level. His bones were denser, his muscles were more powerful, and his cells, down to their core, had evolved to withstand incredible stress. The plasma had hit more than a man. It had hit a biological fortress. She keyed a note into his medical file on the holographic interface. Subject, Ornis Dell. Call sign, Fulcrum. Species, human. Note, subject exhibits anomalously high cellular density and highly reinforced protein mesh, a likely evolutionary adaptation to his high-gravity homeworld. This results in extreme resilience to kinetic and thermal trauma. The full implications of this physiology require further study. Recommend further passive observation and remote study. She shut down the scanner and turned back to Dell, applying a soothing, regenerative balm to his burns. "You are a unique individual, Del Arnes." He just shrugged and smiled slightly. "Ma'am, where I come from, I'm about as plain as they come." "Hello there. It would mean a great deal to us all if you would like this video. Back to our stories." Graduation was a brisk, unceremonious affair. The 81st surviving recruits stood in neat rows on the orbital training station's main parade deck, their new armor reflecting the harsh hangar lights. Fire Team Scythe stood together. Sergeant Ross addressed them. With his arms clasped behind his back, his speech was blunt. "Your time as recruits is over," he growled, his voice booming in the cavernous space. "You are now stellar compact soldiers. We have tested you, and you have proven adequate. This is the highest praise you will receive from me. Out there, in the black, you will face the Scorn Imperium. They are ruthless, technologically superior, and they will move to eradicate you with swift lethality. Your survival will depend on your training, your gear, and the soldier standing next to you. Uphold your training. Bring honor to this uniform. Dismissed." As the ranks broke, Cog zipped over to Dell. "Well, that was nauseatingly inspirational. I feel an overwhelming urge to go conquer a small, undefended moon in his name." Dell chuckled. "He likes us, I think." "He likes us in the same way a metallurgist likes a piece of raw ore he's about to smelt into something useful," Cog retorted. "We are raw material to him." Tella joined them. "He is proud of us. I can feel it. It lies deep beneath several geological layers of professional duty, but it is there." The chime of their unit-wide comms interrupted them. "Fire Team Scythe, report to Briefing Room 3 immediately." A stern-faced Krayan officer delivered the briefing via hologram. Their deployment orders sent them to the Persei Rift, a sector on the warfront's fringe. Their official mission was a stabilization and patrol mission, a quiet first tour designed to ease them into active duty. Ross stood at attention as the officer relayed the orders, but Dell noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw plates. The Persei Rift might be quiet on the official star charts, but Ross knew the galaxy's truth. Every place held a potential danger. A few hours later, they were aboard the SCS Indomitable, a compact assault lander that would be their home for the foreseeable future. The ship shuddered as it disengaged from the station, the powerful hum of its engines vibrating through the deck plates. Dell found himself at a viewport, watching the vast, star-dusted expanse of space unfold. It was beautiful, terrifying, and empty. He clutched the small, whittled figure of a Megagrox in his pocket, a tangible link to the world he'd left behind. Their first patrol was on a planetoid designated X9, a barren chunk of rock orbiting a dying star. The landscape was a panorama of gray dust and jagged craters bathed in the faint light of its parent sun. The air was thin and tasted of grit and ash. Rost had them moving in a standard wedge, the world's silence broken only by the crunch of their boots on the regolith and the comms crackle.
Stay sharp,
Rost's voice murmured in.
Complacency is vulnerability.
Dell kept his eyes moving, his pulse rifle held at a low ready. Holding the rifle felt different now, knowing the next shot fired might be real. Its weight felt more profound. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat, every rock pattern a potential ambush point. From a ridge 200 meters away, a silent flicker of light, a focused plasma bolt crossed the distance instantly. It struck Dell square in the chest. The impact, a solid force, threw him from his feet. One moment he was walking, the next he was flying backward through the air, the world tumbling in a disorienting blur of gray rock and dim sky. He landed hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs in a painful gasp. His system screamed with damage alerts, his helmet's heads-up display flashing a schematic of his torso with a shattered crimson overlay.
Fulcrum down!
Cog's voice was a high-pitched cry of alarm over the comms. Sniper! Ridgeline, 200 meters!
Cover!
Ross bellowed, his own rifle spitting coherent bolts of light toward the enemy position. Tella scrambled towards Dell, her medic packs open. Pain erupted in Dell's chest, a deep throbbing ache like his ribs had shattered. He tried to draw a breath, and it came as a ragged, shallow wheeze. He lay there, staring at the bleak, starless sky, the firefight's sound seeming distant and muted. He was alive. He pushed himself up onto one elbow, and then onto his knees. Tella reached him, her scanner active.
Dale, stay down. Report your injuries.
He ignored her. Grabbing his rifle from the dust beside him, he looked down at his chest. A plasma bolt slagged a perfect circular hole through the outer plasteel and the ceramic trauma plate beneath. Molten metal cooled into a twisted, ugly scar around the point of impact. Beneath the ruined armor, a massive bruise already spread, a supernova of purple, black, and red spreading across his chest. His skin was intact. He grunted a sound of pained effort and raised his rifle. Propping it on a nearby rock for stability, he found the sniper's ridge in his scope. A faint shimmer of a cloaking field gave the scorned soldier away. Gotcha, he rasped and opened fire. He unleashed a torrent of suppressing shots, holding down the trigger and walking the energy bolts across the ridge, forcing the marksman to keep his head down. The enemy's return fire faltered. The distraction gave Cog the opening he needed, acknowledging Dell's covering shots with a clipped, "On it!" The synthetic moved, a gray shape darting between craters in a wide flanking maneuver. Minutes later, a single burst of pulse fire from the ridge's side silenced the enemy marksman for good. Silence returned to the planetoid. Rost and Tella helped Dell to his feet. He swayed, a deep ache throbbed in his chest, but he stayed upright. Cog zipped back to the group, his chassis lights a steady bright white, his optical sensor wide. He stared at the hole in Dell's armor, then at the monstrous bruise beneath it. Rost examined the damage to the chest plate. He tapped the hole's warped, melted edge. A standard scorn plasma cannon. At this range, that should have vaporized your heart and exited through your spine. Dell took a deep, shuddering breath. It hurt like hell. Guess he wasn't holding it right. Tella was running her scanner over him again, her brow furrowed as she stared at her readouts.
Your vitals are stable, ribs intact. Severe deep tissue contusion, but you should be dead, Dell.
Dell just managed a weak grin. Too stubborn, I reckon. He looked at his fire team gathered around him under the dim alien sun. Later that shift, back at the temporary fire base they had established in a shallow cave, the fight's adrenaline had faded, leaving them exhausted. He had survived, and now Dell cleaned his rifle, the repetitive motions a calming ritual. A series of soft clicks announced Cog's approach. The synthetic held out a small, intricate multi-tool. "There's a scratch on your rifle's casing," Cog said. "My diagnostic tool has a micro-polisher function that can buff it out without affecting the sensor alignment." Dell looked at the tiny scratch, then at Cog. "Thanks, Cog," Dell said, handing him the weapon. Cog worked in silence for a few minutes, the micro-polisher emitting a soft, high whine as it smoothed the imperfection. Multiple servo arms deployed from his chassis and moved with fluid independence, one bracing the weapon, two guiding the tool, while a third adjusted its settings. Dell watched him, then reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out his worn photograph of Daisy, the Megagrox. He offered it to the synthetic. "This is what I used to do," Dell said, "before all this." Cog paused his work. Taking the photo in one of his delicate manipulators, he tilted his head, his primary optical sensor studying the image. "That is a remarkably large and hirsute creature. Is it a predator?" "Daisy? Nah, she's a sweetheart," Dell chuckled. "Gentle as a lamb, mostly. We raise them for their milk, their wool, and their meat." "You consume them?" Cog stated, handing the photo back. "Yeah, it's the cycle of things back home," Dell explained. "You care for them, you protect them, and they provide for you. It's simple, honest work." He looked at the photo, and a familiar ache for home tightened his chest. "Everything out here is complicated." "Correction," Cog said, finishing his work on the rifle and handing it over, its surface smooth. "Everything out here is hard. What you did today, taking that shot, was surprisingly effective." "We're a team," Dell said, giving the synthetic a friendly pat on the chassis, a gesture that made the synthetic's frame retract a few millimeters before its social programming corrected the motion. "We look out for each other." Cog's frame emitted a soft, steady hum. "Indeed, Fulcrum." The call came in what passed for morning on their small patch of rock. A distress call, heavily distorted by solar interference and encrypted with an older stellar compact code. The transmission was a whisper from the deep static. High Command patched them through to the sector admiral, a grim-faced Krayan whose exoskeletal features seemed permanently set in a scowl. His holographic image flickered in the cramped confines of their lander's comms room.
"The signal originates from a listening post on Leith 4, a moon in the adjacent system,"
the admiral rumbled, his voice a low, seismic reverberation.
"The post went dark 3 weeks ago. We marked it as a loss. This is the first we've heard from it."
The recording played. Static dominated the recording, but a faint voice emerged from the noise. "Survivors. Trap. Scorn. Imperium." The message cut out.
"The message is on loop," the admiral stated. "It could be a cry for help, or it could be a Scorn fabrication designed to lure a relief force."
Rost stood at parade rest, his attention fixed on the hologram.
"And our orders, Admiral? You're the closest unit, Sergeant. Light-footed over to Leith 4. Investigate the listening post. Assess the situation. If there are survivors, extract them. If it's a trap, ensure you evade capture."
The admiral finished.
"Your team's gear is equipped with short-range emergency transponders. Use them for hot extraction only as a last resort."
The admiral's hologram looked directly at them, and he let his gaze linger for a moment on Dell.
"The compact is aware of your team's recent engagement, Sergeant, and the remarkable resilience of your human asset. Avoid testing its limits. Admiral out."
The image vanished, leaving them in the comms room's dim light. They were likely flying into a trap. Ross turned to him, his expression as hard as granite.
"Gear up,"
he commanded.
"Cog, plot a course. Tella, double-check your medkit. Fulcrum, try to remain upright. We'll lift off in 5.
Ruin defined the moon, Leith 4. It orbited a swirling gas giant, its atmosphere the color of a bruise, and its surface a fractured landscape of black volcanic rock and deep, shadowy chasms. The listening post was a squat Duracrete blister on the edge of one such chasm, an outpost in an ocean of silence. They landed a kilometer out and approached on foot, using the jagged terrain for cover. The post was dark and inert.
Threat assessment elevated.
Cog transmitted over their private comm channel, his running lights dimming to a bare minimum.
The power signatures are flat, even emergency life support.
Proceed with caution,
Rost ordered.
Fulcrum, take point.
Dell nodded, his rifle up. His stomach tightened. The main airlock was partially open, its edges scarred by plasma fire. He squeezed through, his boots crunching on something on the floor. He looked down, a spent energy cell from a Scorn rifle. Scorn marks blackened the walls, and shattered consoles lay everywhere. The acrid scent of fried circuits hung in the air. They found the crew in the command center. 6 bodies. 6 bodies, all Stellar Compact personnel, executed with a single shot to the head. Tella knelt beside one body, her shoulders slumping.
They fought back,
she said, gesturing to the discarded compact rifles.
but they were overwhelmed.
Dell felt fury rise in him. A massacre. As Cog scanned the station's systems, he let out a sharp hiss.
Sarge, the internal sensors just came online. I'm reading multiple life signs all around us. They were hiding in shielded alcoves. It's a trap!
As he spoke, heavy blast doors slammed shut with a deafening clang, sealing the exits. The emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a bloody crimson glow. Panels slid open in the walls, and from the hidden recesses emerged the tall, menacing figures of Scorn shock troops, their rifles leveled, surrounding them. The room erupted in plasma fire and percussive sound. Plasma bolts, brilliant green and deadly, tore through the air. Fireteam Scythe dove for cover, returning fire with disciplined burst.
Fall back to the central console bank!
Rost roared, laying down a suppressing fire that forced 2 Scorn troopers back into their alcove. His dense exoskeleton flared with a dull orange glow as a stray bolt glanced off his shoulder. Dell crouched behind a shattered server rack, firing in short, controlled bursts. Cog darted between cover, his small size making him a difficult target. Tella was already patching up a graze on Cog's chassis while simultaneously firing her sidearm. But for every Scorn trooper they downed, 2 more appeared. The Scorn troops pinned them down systematically, shrinking their field of fire and blasting away their cover piece by piece. Rost, trying to move to a better position to cover Tella, exposed himself for a fraction of a second too long. A concentrated volley of fire slammed into his leg, buckling it. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the point of impact as his exoskeleton absorbed the energy, but the kinetic force was too much. The outer layers shattered with a sound like fracturing ceramic, and he went down with a grunt of pain.
Sarge!
Tella cried, moving toward him.
Stay back!
He ordered, propping himself up on one arm. His leg was mangled.
This position is untenable. We're out of options.
A ricochet nearly took off Cog's optical sensor. Dell's cover disintegrated under the barrage. The Scorn soldiers advanced, their fire relentless. Ross, the veteran of a dozen campaigns, spoke the words as if they were ash.
Sight team!
He bellowed, his voice straining with pain and fury.
Cease fire! We are surrendering!
The command center fell silent, broken only by the Scorn rifle's hum. One by one, following the sergeant's order, the members of Fireteam Scythe lowered their weapons. Dell lowered his weapon, his hands shaking with rage. They had lost. The Scorn guards disarmed them, their hands bound tightly behind their backs with crackling energy binders. They dragged Ross to his feet, his shattered leg leaving a trail of exoskeletal dust on the floor. They shoved them forward through the command center and into a larger adjacent chamber converted into a makeshift throne room. Warlord Garak sat on a command chair salvaged from the wreckage. He was larger than the other Scorn soldiers, his armor more ornate, etched with symbols of conquest. He smiled, a cruel twist of his thin lips as he surveyed his captives. A guard dumped their confiscated gear onto a nearby console. Dell saw Tella's medkit, Cog's tool pouch with the micropolisher visible, Ross' sidearm, and his own rifle. Its casing was still smooth.
Behold,
Garak boomed, his voice dripping with condescension.
the Stellar Compact's might. A broken old shellback, a chattering machine, a sentimental empath, and what is this?
He fixed his gaze on Dell.
A primate? Truly, the compact scrapes the bottom of the galactic barrel for its soldiers. Such a pathetic collection of backworlders.
He rose from his chair and paced before them, like a biologist examining curious specimens.
I am Warlord Garruk. This sector now belongs to the Scorn Imperium. Your little listening post has served me well as a forward command center. Your capture is but the final piece of my victory.
He paused.
Interrogation can wait. First, we will demonstrate the futility of hope.
Ross glared at him, his jaws set.
You will pay for what you did to the crew of this station, Garruk.
Garruk laughed, a harsh, grating sound.
They died for defying their superiors, just as you will. But a simple death is a mercy, and a mercy is a weakness my people have evolved beyond. I think a demonstration is in order. I must break your spirit before I break your bodies.
Garruk's eyes glittered. He strode to the console where their gear lay and picked up a weapon set apart from the others. The weapon was a pistol, sleek, black, and menacing. Its matte finish reflected nothing, a void in the shape of a weapon, humming with a barely restrained power.
My personal sidearm,
Garruk announced, holding it up for them to see.
A masterpiece of Scorn engineering. You see, a standard plasma bolt cauterizes as it burns. It is messy, but ultimately clean. This,
he caressed the pistol,
is far more elegant. It is a particle destabilizer. It unravels organic tissue at the molecular level. It turns flesh, bone, and blood into a fine gray dust.
Tella flinched. Cox's chassis vibrated.
It is a tool of fear,
Garruk continued, his voice soft and venomous.
And fear is the most effective weapon in any arsenal. Now, which of you will have the honor of serving as my demonstration?
He swept his gaze over them. He considered the defiant, wounded Rost. He looked at the trembling Cog. He glanced past the stoic Tella. Then he settled on Dale. The human watched Garruk with a look of quiet disappointment, as if the warlord was a neighbor who had let his megagroks wander into the wrong pasture. The human's calm insulted him.
The primate,
Garruk hissed.
We will start with the primate.
He raised his pistol, his dark muzzle aimed squarely at the center of Dell's chest. His squad mates cried out. Ross lunged forward, roaring, but two guards slammed him back against the wall.
Watch closely,
Garruk said, a sneer on his face.
And despair.
Garruk pulled the trigger. A low hum escalated into a piercing whine. A shimmering beam of emerald green energy, thick as a man's arm, erupted from the pistol's muzzle and engulfed Dell. The air in the room went sharp and thin, tasting of superheated dust and static. The light was blinding. Dell's uniform, where the beam made contact, vaporized instantly. The energy held on him for a full 3 seconds. His teammates watched in horror. Tella shut her eyes. Then the energy dissipated. The whine faded, leaving a sudden silence in its wake. Dell was still standing. His uniform had vanished from his chest and stomach, revealing the scarred muscle torso beneath. In a bright red splotch, a perfect circle of irritated skin that looked like a bad sunburn marked the center of his chest. He looked down at the red mark, poked it with a finger as if testing a hot stove, then glanced back up at Warlord Garruk. His expression was one of polite concern, the look of a man trying to help a mechanic figure out why an engine won't turn over. He tilted his head slightly. You might want to check the power cell on that thing, Dell said, his voice echoing in the silence. For a moment, the faint hum of life support filled the room. Warlord Garag stared, his jaw slack, the particle destabilizer held limply in his hand. His mind, steeped in the doctrine of Scorn's superiority, failed to reconcile the sight. The weapon was perfect. The target was an inferior biological specimen. The outcome should have been annihilation. The Scorn guards murmured amongst themselves, their discipline wavering for the first time. They had witnessed the destabilizer turn rebellious chieftains and captured soldiers to ash. Their faith in their warlord and the technology that underpinned it shook. Garok's face contorted with rage. He perceived it as a personal affront from the universe itself.
Unbelievable!
He shrieked, his voice cracking with fury.
A malfunction!
He looked at the weapon as if it had betrayed him. His knuckles were white where he gripped it. With a snarl, he located the power calibration dial near the trigger guard and cranked it all the way up to the right, far past the recommended safety limits. The weapon whined in protest, its casing glowing with a dull red heat.
You mock me, primate!
He screamed, his face contorted with hate.
You will be dust!
He fired again. This time, the beam was thicker, its green light so intense it was almost white. The blast's sheer kinetic force picked Dell up off his feet and slammed him into the metal bulkhead behind him with enough force to leave a man-shaped dent in the wall. The beam pinned him there, a roaring torrent of destructive energy that made the air itself scream. The impact was staggering. It felt like every molecule in his body vibrated to the point of disintegration. The pain was a dull, overwhelming roar, but beneath it all, his body held. His dense bones, his reinforced cells, his stubborn, high-gravity biology were resisting. The beam cut out. Dell slid down the wall, landing in a heap on the floor. Dazed, his ears ringing, he was whole. He pushed himself up, shaking his head to clear it. The red mark on his chest was bigger now, an angry, blistering crimson, but his skin was still intact. Burned and battered, but undeniably alive. Garok stared, his arrogance shattered, replaced by a frantic madness.
It's defective! Fraud! Sabotaged!
He screamed, and frantically disassembled his weapon, prying at the casing with shaking fingers. The guards were in disarray, their attention divided between their unraveling commander and the unfathomable human. The edifice of Scorn dominance had just developed a large human-shaped crack, and in that moment of chaos, Sergeant Rost saw his chance. While Garok frantically disassembled his weapon, Rost's tactical mind was already working. The confusion, the guards' wavering discipline, the warlord's complete distraction. He needed a silent signal. He subtly shifted his weight, turning his bound hands just enough so that Tella could see them. He flexed the muscles in his hand, sending a specific bioelectric command to the chromatophores embedded in his exoskeleton. For a fraction of a second, the surface of his hand shifted its texture, polarizing the ambient light in a coded, pulsating flicker. The flicker was subtle, but to the Cerulean with their heightened sensory perceptions, it was clear. The signal was simple. Distraction. Medical emergency. On my mark. Her shock gave way to understanding. A slight, almost imperceptible nod was her reply. She stilled, her focus sharpening. Rost waited. The guards hesitated. Two of them took a step toward their commander as Garok threw a component of his pistol to the floor in frustration. Now. A second pulse of light flashed from his hand. The mark. On Rost's cue, Tella rolled her eyes back in her head and her body went rigid. A low moan escaped her lips before she collapsed to the floor, her slender frame convulsing violently. The sudden event startled the guards. Their training was for combat, not medical emergencies. One of them moved toward her, intending to restrain her.
She's having a seizure,
He called out to his comrades. He knelt, grabbing her arm, inadvertently pulling her closer to the console where their confiscated gear lay piled. As another faint convulsion racked her body, she moved her hand with startling speed. She palmed the bioelectric defibrillator from her open medkit, a device used to restart a Cerulean's heart with a targeted electrical shock. She jammed its contact points against the control panel for the energy binders. A crackle and the smell of burnt electronics filled the air. The control circuit shorted out. Across the room, the energy fields binding the squad's hands fizzled and died. They were free. The moment the binder released them, Cog moved. He snatched the micropolisher from the console and sprinted for the heavy-duty rack where the Scorn soldiers had stored the squad's confiscated rifles. Magnetic locks secured the rack and connected it to the station's power grid. Cog jammed his multi-tool into the rack's diagnostic port. The tool, designed to write data on a microscopic level, injected a single line of override code, a maintenance backdoor exploit. The magnetic lock screamed a high-pitched protest, then disengaged with a series of heavy, satisfying clinks. Rost, his voice a roar that cut to the chaos, gave his final order.
Hammer! Now!
Dell surged to his feet, a living engine of high-gravity muscle and bone. He charged headlong into the cluster of disoriented guards, a human battering ram, throwing them through the air to crash into the walls and consoles. Rost, Tella, and Cog armed themselves from the unlocked rack. The muted clicks of pulse rifles charging echoed in the room. A furious close-quarters firefight exploded in the warlord's throne room.
We need to do more than run!
Ross bellowed over the din of battle, firing a controlled burst that dropped a scorn guard trying to flank them.
We make this count! Cog! The console! Get their intel!
While the rest of the squad created a pocket of covering fire for Cog to work, he dove for the main command station that Garok had used. The terminal was still active, displaying the sector's tactical overlays. Cog slapped his multi-tool onto the main data port. The versatile little tool interfaced with the Scorn system. Code, written in complex angular alien script, scrolled across the holographic display. Cog's optical sensors scanned back and forth, absorbing the information rapidly. He was prioritizing, grabbing the most critical files first. Fleet movements, supply convoy routes, troop deployment schedules for the entire Persei Rift, he muttered, his manipulators working across the interface.
It's all here! They thought this outpost was secure!
The firefight around him was a vortex of green and red energy bolts. Dell had found a discarded bulkhead panel and was using it as a makeshift shield, planting his feet and absorbing hits that sizzled and sparked against the heavy metal. He was a mobile shield, drawing the enemy's fire. Tella, her seizure forgotten, moved with the medic's purpose, placing well-aimed shots with her rifle while simultaneously trying to apply a spray-on coagulant to Ross' still-bleeding leg. Garok looked up from his weapon, his face twisted with fury. His prize captives were escaping, his elite guards fell, and they violated his command center. He snatched a standard rifle from a fallen soldier and fired wildly into the fray, screaming curses.
Got it!
Cog yelled, yanking his polisher from the port, just as a plasma bolt vaporized the console's screen.
I have everything!
Then we leave!
Ross commanded.
To the roof! Access conduit 9! Go!
They fought their way out of the command center, leaving a trail of stunned and wounded Scorn soldiers behind them. Alarms blared through the station, a frantic, pulsing wail. They plunged into the service corridors, a maze of pipes and conduits.
This way!
Cog chirped, leading them confidently. He had already integrated the downloaded station schematics into his tactical overlay. More Scorn forces were converging on their position, trying to cut them off. A running gun battle raged in the tight, claustrophobic confines of the outpost. Dell took the rear guard, his broad frame filling the corridor. His makeshift shield and relentless covering fire formed a roadblock the Scorn struggled to breach. They burst through a hatch and onto the station's exterior. The view was staggering. The gas giant leaf swirling stormy atmosphere filled half the sky, a backdrop for their desperate last stand. The surface was a flat expanse of pitted metal dotted with communication arrays and ventilation units that offered meager cover. They stood exposed. Cog scrambled to the highest point, deploying a small, powerful emergency transponder.
Sight to Lender Indomitable! Hot extract! I repeat, hot extract! Primary structure's roof! Now, damn it, now!
The access hatch they'd come through flew open, and Scorn troops, led by the raging Gorok, began pouring onto the surface. The squad fanned out, taking cover behind the ventilation units, preparing to fight to the end. Their lander, the Indomitable, screamed down from the sky. Its engines burned white-hot against the black of space, its ventral cannons firing, strafing the Scorn forces and forcing them to scramble for cover. The ship settled into a shaky hover a few meters above the roof, its main ramp slamming down with a hydraulic hiss.
Go! Get the ship!
Rost ordered. They faced a 20-meter sprint across open ground under heavy fire. Rost, with his bad leg, moved with difficulty, leaning on Tella for support. They went first, covered by Dell and Cog. Plasma bolts stitched the air around them. Cog, providing covering fire as he retreated, let out a burst of static as a stray shot blew off one of his servo arms, sending him spinning to the deck. Instantly, Ross shoved Tella toward the ramp.
Get on board!
He roared. then turned and leant back for the fallen synthetic, grabbing Cog by his harness and dragging him toward the lander's safety. Only Del remained. He stood his ground at the access hatch, laying down a furious, constant stream of fire, his borrowed pulse rifle growing hot in his hands. He created a wall of energy that held the scorned soldiers back. Another hit to the chest shattered his makeshift shield, while one to his shoulder spun him around. A third caught him in the leg. His armor was failing, ablating away under the onslaught, but his dense high-gravity body endured. He grunted with the pain of each impact, but stood his ground. "Fulcrum, up here," Cog yelled from the ramp. The Indomita's engines whined as the pilot fought to keep her steady. The ramp rose. Del emptied the last of his energy cell at the enemy, then turned and ran. He sprinted across the rooftop, energy bolts searing the air behind him. He leaped the last few meters, landing hard on the rising ramp and scrabbling inside just as it sealed shut with a final thud. A volley of plasma fire splashed against the hull as the lander rocketed away from the moon, leaving a broken, burning listening post and a humiliated warlord in its wake. Weeks later, the Persei Rift was a different place. Using the intelligence Cog had stolen, the Stellar Compact raided convoys, ambushed fleets, and shattered the Scorn Imperium's forward momentum. The Compact held Fireteam Scythe, the band of misfits and backworlders, as heroes. They were tired and bruised, but alive. They were recovering in the starbase Stellar Compact Victory's bustling mess hall, a city-sized station teeming with 1,000 different species. Cog sported a new, factory-fresh servo arm, its chrome finish still reflecting the mess hall lights. Rost walked with a new, cybernetically reinforced leg, the limp almost unnoticeable. Tala sipped a nutrient broth, the calm returned to her empathetic senses. Del was just staring into his mug of water, lost in thought. Sergeant Ross cast a heavy shadow over their table. He was holding a steaming mug, identical to Del's, filled with a dark, almost black liquid that smelled strange and bitter. He set the mug down in front of Del.
"Human beverage,"
Ross rumbled.
"Coffee."
Del looked at the mug, then up at Rost. The sergeant had gone to the trouble of researching human customs, of replicating a drink from a world he had never seen. Del picked up the mug and took a cautious sip. It tasted like burnt soil and regret. The station's food synthesizers had done a poor job with the replication. Del choked, forcing the liquid down. He gave Rost a watery-eyed smile.
It's, got a kick, Sarge. Thank you.
Rost's jaw plates remained set, but he placed a heavy, armored hand on Del's shoulder.
"The science division has been analyzing the data telelogged from your medicals,"
Rost said, his voice low.
"Combined with the battle reports from Leith, they have a theory."
He paused.
"They say your species evolved on a death world, a planet whose gravity and environment are so hostile that it forces life to become stubborn, that your biology is fundamentally difficult to kill."
Del thought about the back-breaking labor, the unpredictable weather, the crushing weight of home. He thought about his family, his friends, people who faced it all with a simple, uncomplaining grit. They were human. A slow grin spread across his face.
"Reckon that's us, Sarge. Too stubborn to know when we're beat."
Cog let out a burst of static that resolved into what sounded like a synthetic chuckle. Tala's quiet smile bloomed in a genuine, warm laugh. And for the first time, Del saw the corners of Sergeant Rost's heavy jaw plates twitch upward in the crayon version of a smile. They sat there for a moment, the four of them, a collection of mismatched parts from across the galaxy. They were more than a fire team. They were a family, forged in fire and absurdity, held together by bad coffee and the heart of a farm boy from a heavy world.